All right, guys, welcome to Tips for New Charge Nurses. I'm Katie Kleber.
Hey, I'm Elizabeth Mills.
And I'm Melissa Stafford.
And this is the Fresh RN podcast, y'all. So before we get into it, if you want to check out our show notes, you head to freshrn.com/44. That's freshrn.com/44. And we're going to talk tips for you guys that are hopping into the role of new charge nurses. This is it's a little bit of an overwhelming thing. And we want to describe kind of the role first. And one of the things that you're really you're kind of like the manager a little bit. But more so managing like the actual flow in and out of the unit. Mm-hmm. So responsibilities of a charge nurse, we'll list off some. So, you're the one who knows how many beds you got, how many open ones there are. If you're working on a med-surg unit, how many discharges, how many post-procedures are coming in, how many possible transfers from the ICU. So worrying about that kind of big picture. Also dealing with customer service issues. So if a patient or family is upset and the patient says, I want to talk to the charge nurse, guess who gets to go deal with that?
We got to make it sound like it's fun.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I got nothing.
You're in charge.
No.
You're in charge.
Yep. You're the boss.
It's nice to be in that. It's because when you are in a position where they don't give you a full patient load and you can really be kind of directing traffic and be a support to like the preceptors, the new nurses, like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But the tough thing comes in is when you have a full patient assignment and then you also have to be responsible for the throughput of the unit. That's tough.
And you really, to be a successful charge nurse, you really have to have a good grasp of the whole unit overall. So maybe not every detail on what's going on with every patient, but you should know which ones kind of need a closer watch.
Yes.
Which ones might be on their way out the door, whether it be a discharge home, transfer to another unit, or what have you. And then, keeping an eye on assignments for nurses, because you don't want to give the same nurse all hard assignments. Nurse A gets all the busy patients. Nurse B gets all the easy patients.
Right.
And,
not cool, guys. Don't do that.
That is not cool. You really need to kind of think through that. And I think as a new charge nurse, that's a challenge because making appropriate assignments is hard. Mm-hmm. It's not just putting together physical location of the patient. Just because two patients are side by side does not mean they make a good assignment together.
Preach.
I could for a long time.
And also considering in the patient assignment too, if you have any preceptors and the preceptees, what kind of patients they need.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And considering that in the assignment. Well, a lot of times the way kind of units work is the charge nurses switch off at kind of an off time. So maybe the day shift charge nurse might come in slightly earlier to get like charge report, which is like, this is what's going on in the unit, and this is what's probably going to happen today. These are our issues. And then you get charge report, and then you get your patient report. And hopefully a lot of places have it where like the night shift charge nurse makes the day shift patient assignment. Mm-hmm. And then you would do that for night shift if you were the day shift charge nurse. And the day shift charge nurse is going to be dealing with a lot more in and out of the unit, while the night shift charge nurse not dealing with that nearly as much because obviously you're not having routine discharges or admissions. It's kind of the off hours, but they still have responsibility because you have significantly less resources at night. Mm-hmm. So
I think overall, you really have to try to be your best at being proactive, regardless of whatever the issue is. Mm-hmm. So proactive in thinking through assignments, proactive in thinking about throughput, proactive in who's going to admit. In the ICU, in a perfect world, we would always be 2-to-1. But reality is sometimes we have to go above that. So who's the best nurse to do that at the time and to plan for that? Mm-hmm. Hopefully it won't happen. But Elizabeth, it's, I'm going to look at you to admit this next patient if it happens so that Elizabeth is prepared that, she needs to stay up on things and here comes the next patient.
Yeah, because it's like maybe Elizabeth's got a patient that's probably going to transfer.
Right.
Or if we know they're not going to transfer, but they're a patient who's kind of a floor level patient anyway.
Who's stable. And
right. Like considering, or if you're on the floor, that kind of a thing where it's like, okay, maybe this person can take an extra, but this person has a little more wiggle room than this one who hasn't sat down all day and giving them another patient. Or on the med-surg floor, like giving someone multiple admissions back to back, super duper not cool.
Yeah.
That kind of thing is really really important. So you have to have that big picture
And-
in
Yeah.
mind.
You have to understand, like, what's really been happening a lot in our unit is, in my unit, I guess, is we have very high census right now. And this is where we have patients that are waiting to come in and we're full. So I need to know what's the plan for these neuro patients that come in. Because if they come in with something that doesn't necessarily need a brain drain, for example, they might be okay to go to one of the other ICUs.
Yeah.
But if they come in with a subarachnoid hemorrhage and an EVD, they have to come to my unit. So I need to know who I'm going to move at what time. And it's better to have that conversation on the front end before it becomes an emergency than it is just to react all the time.
Right. And to run around to all the nurses and say, oh my gosh, what do you have? Can this person move?
Right.
Like being able to do that is so important. I like the med surg unit I was on that took cardiac patients. There was that unit, they took some very specific patients that had to be on their unit. So they had to know which other patients would have to be moved out to make room for those should they come, or actually they'd always typically have some planned procedures so they knew they were coming. But planning for that, and that's your responsibility as a proactive charge nurse, because that will make it run so much smoother for you and everybody else, because that's really stressful to react to that in the moment when you hadn't thought about it at all.
You know, sometimes one of the things that my unit tried to do is they always try to give the charge nurse the light assignment, which is great unless you're giving them 2 patients that is transferring out. Because that means then the charge nurse now has 2 admissions coming.
Yeah.
And so you really have to think through, what does that assignment practically look like? Am I appreciative of the fact that I have 2 easy patients so I can be a resource for everybody else? Absolutely. But the moment I'm now concentrating on 1 or 2 admissions, I'm not that resource for anybody else anymore.
Right.
So maybe the assignment isn't the transfers. Maybe the assignment is the patient that is the most stable, but it's going to stay put. You know, thinking through things like that. And fairly recently had an assignment that I walked into. There was a nurse that we were going to get from another unit that ended up not being able to come. So I'm like, that's fine. I'll just take that assignment. No big deal. So I take the assignment. Well, now bear in mind, I'm in an ICU unit. So we had 2-to-1 assignment. But patient number 1 had Q 30-minute IV medication administration.
Shut the front door.
Patient number 2 had Q1 hour blood sugars for an insulin drip.
Wonderful.
Patient number 1 needed 2 units of blood.
Okay.
Patient number
I'm tired.
2
Tired already.
needed 1 unit of blood. Patient number 1
What do you
needed
do first?
procedure, I don't know, let's just say central line. Patient number 2 needed a lumbar puncture.
Oh,
Like, who in their right mind put these 2 patients together?
Right, let alone give them to someone who has additional responsibilities on top of a regular
Right.
nurse on the unit.
So, and I don't think anybody ever sets out to, you know, really screw somebody else. I mean, to put it bluntly, I think they try, but I think that when you have an experience, you have to be mindful of to think through that. Like the charge nurse that made that assignment didn't have any of those patients, and so
Didn't have any information then.
right. But these are the things that you need to ask
Right.
about.
Yeah, so that's that charge report.
Yeah.
So when I say charge report, typically what that means is charge nurse to charge nurse, they go around the entire unit and say roughly what is going on. Not all the details. Hey, this patient came in for a cardiac workup. They're an AFib with RVR. They're on an amio drip. This patient is status post-cath, going home today. And like going down the line, right? That's all, and it's like, okay, this one's a little unstable. This one might need a unit of blood. This one has a sitter, or like all that kind of stuff. So you just generally get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
What is everybody dealing with? So you want to be prepared for that emergent thing, but you also want to be prepared to proactively, when you get the admissions, when they start coming in, who's the first nurse that's going to get it? Who's the second nurse? And do they know?
Yeah.
Let me tell you my pet peeve. Maybe we can go into charge nurse pet peeves, but I hate this, is when, okay, you hear the charge nurse beeper go off that says you got a patient coming, right? And then the charge nurse looks around and says, so who wants that patient? Not cool. You better figure out who you're going to give that to and say, hey, just
Nobody
so you know,
wants that patient.
Yeah, just so you know, when none of us want this patient. Don't ask, because then it's like,
But
well,
we
now
love taking care of patients.
we do. But nobody wants to do an admission. Let's be honest.
Right.
So it's like, now it's like,
Well, I
we
guess
have to figure
will.
this out.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, this is your job. You're the one who has the big picture. Like, I don't know if my assignment is heavier than somebody else's. Like, if it's my turn to take it, I'll take the patient. But if your friend has a really light assignment
And is kicking it at the nurse's station.
old girl needs that
that.
needs that patient, not me who hasn't sat down in 5 hours. Right. So that's one of my big pet peeves, is like being able to proactively know what's going on in the unit. So when you need to move a bed quickly or move someone in and out, you have an idea of what's going on. And then also when the admissions come, because they will, you have a plan of who's going to be the first ones to get them, and making sure they know about it. And as that evolves throughout the day,
It changes.
It changes, right? So it's like, okay, so Elizabeth got the first admission, Stafford got the second one, and then okay, those are situated. Maybe okay, then you look at everything. Okay, here's going to be the next person that gets it, and you go tell that person that, just so you know, whenever we get another admission, it's going to be your patient, okay? And if you need help getting the admission, this is why, and if you need help getting the admission navigator, I got you, or whatever it is. But don't like ask people if they want it, because we're all tired.
Right.
We all want to have an easy day.
Yeah,
right.
and we know that doesn't exist, but there's this little hope in our heart that we're going to have an easier day.
I know.
Yes.
So then another responsibility too is you are getting the admission. So as the charge nurse, you're getting the admissions, right? But you know what? Patients aren't always appropriate for your unit. And you as a charge nurse, you see that pager go off, and you see what patients come into you. You go look up that patient and you see if they're supposed to come to your unit. Because I especially working at a teaching hospital where you have new teams of residents come in and they say, oh, that's the cardiac floor. And they don't know that there's a difference between the CV surgery floor and the cardiology floor. Or that they don't know that, okay, this ortho floor also typically takes all the urology patients, and that patient needs to go to, you know what I mean? So making sure that patient that's coming to your unit really should go to your unit.
On your floor, was your charge nurse, did they typically have patients?
I think so. Usually they had day shift nurses would have 5 patients, usually 4 to 5, and they would have 1 to 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And it would be a manageable patient, or maybe if it was one patient, maybe it was a little bit heavier of a patient, but it was typically just one. There's a lot of throughput with them, discharges and timing,
right,
ambulances and all that kind of stuff, and getting all the ED patients. But I think that would happen. So you would get a patient up to our unit who'd been in the ED for 7 hours waiting on a bed, and they get up here and they're on a drip we can't run.
Yeah.
or they're not, they should not be on this unit. So now we got to so now I took report on them. I did an assessment. They shouldn't be here. Now we need to transfer them somewhere else. The patient's mad, rightly so. And then then we have to facilitate. So now it's we got a room that's dirty that needs to be cleaned again. Like, how much of a headache that is, right? So being proactive about checking who's coming to your unit, making sure that's appropriate so you don't have to deal with that kind of a headache. Another responsibility is being attentive to what patients aren't doing well, because you're going to be the resource. So if so hopefully in charge and report, you got a couple patients you're hearing about, maybe they're not doing so well, that you're proactively kind of checking on them and seeing if that nurse needs anything. And maybe peeking to see, okay, are they making sure we got everything, because dealing with code, dealing with an RT, we don't want to have to do that kind of stuff if we don't need to. And maybe we need an experienced nurse to go in there and just check, see if everything's going okay.
Or help guide somebody that maybe forgot to look at something,
right,
or didn't report something, or
right.
You really are a resource. So if you don't know what your resources are, find out.
Charge nurses need to know their resources.
Because let me tell you, there's times I don't know the answer to things. Once again, almost 20 years, I still don't know the answer to everything. Never will. Is who do I go to figure that out?
Yes.
And that's really important. You can't just say I don't know and throw your hands up in the air. I'm not sure, but let me figure it out. Let's see what we can do here.
And there's so many weird things that happen that then charge nurse is the one that has to figure out. Like, what if you're pretty sure there's a drug deal going on in your patient's room? What if I'm saying that because it happens.
It does happen. So who do you call?
Like, legitimately, who do I call?
You can't run away and be like, oh my gosh.
Right. Or I need to give this patient an MRI and they have an ankle bracelet on. How do I deal with that?
An ankle bracelet.
That's so
Otherwise
great.
known as handcuffs.
That
Or
happens.
right? Or like
And it'll happen on your shift.
it'll happen on your shift. You have
It'll happen in your beginning phase as a charge nurse. You're gonna have some crazy.
I'm just trying to think of bizarre examples of things because that
Yeah.
stuff happens and you're the one that especially if like you're maybe 2-3 years in and you've got all these newbies 6 months out of orientation, they're gonna look to you and say, how do I deal with
It's
it?
downtime.
If you-
Where's all of your paper charting?
Yes, it's downtime, or maybe the tube system's down and you have stat stuff and you don't even know where the lab is. you know how to send a thing to the lab, but you don't, and you need to get something, or
Yeah.
maybe one of your patients wandered off the unit.
Yep.
Oh,
How do you
my.
deal with that?
Yep.
Or if you have a patient getting hostile or a visitor and you're worried someone's going to get assaulted or get serious, knowing how to
Or
call
some-
security, like that kind of stuff is really important. So, and it's not
Or
knowing.
the toilet explodes and there's water all over your patient's room.
Also seen that happen.
Saw the ceiling cave in from a water leak once.
Yes, or
Well,
the
actually, more than
patient
once.
like gets like stuck somewhere. I don't know.
Oh, it
We had a
happens.
nurse get caught in an elevator with the patient one time.
Yes. Oh my gosh. happened.
Elevator stuck.
Elevator stuck.
Patient's in there, getting bagged.
Getting bagged.
So for those of you who don't work in the ICU, that's somebody who's on a ventilator that is not currently on a ventilator. It's a mask that you use to give them respirations.
It's
You
bad
kind of
news.
have to have a oxygen tank is ideal, and hopefully more than one if you're stuck in the elevator.
Oh my gosh.
It's
That's
it's a little
something off a
challenging.
TV show, but it does happen.
It does. I promise it does.
Well, and it's not, you don't have to know exactly what to do, but you have to know who to call.
Yes.
And you have to be
Nursing
able
supervisor.
to, that's usually the answer. Security or
Nursing
the supervisor.
supervisor.
Those are, and so a piece of this is knowing,
Ghostbusters, obviously.
obviously, but for, you have to know how to utilize your resources and being okay to ask them the questions that feel silly. Like, so I have a patient and I can't find them. I don't know what to do. Like being able to, because it's a little humbling to have some situations happen when you're like, I don't know how to deal with this, but being able to be frank, open, honest, and say, hey, I've got this situation here. I don't know how to deal with it. Can you help me or point me in the right direction?
Yep.
And that's a mark of a good charge nurse, is being able to do that.
Know your resources and know how to look up policies too.
Yes.
Know how to look up policies.
Because that's what you have to fall back on, is whatever your policy says.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the big thing is that you really have to make sure that you are on top of what's going on in the unit. So knowing the patients, knowing the flow, knowing the nurses that you have, and making sure that you're planning throughout the shift.
Yes. Oh, and I have one more. Oh, did you have one?
Well, in an ICU setting, if you are out of certain pieces of equipment,
Oh, yes. Knowing how to get
where
those.
to go.
Yes, that's a really good, how do you order equipment, how do I get a new code cart right now? Like that kind of stuff. Another last one I wanted to quickly mention too is, especially if you're also working on nights, I think it's a little more appropriate or applicable for nights, but as the charge nurse and the kind of informal leader, let's say you got a little disagreement going on between some of your nurses. Got some people that are not being cool or not being professional. As a charge nurse, you got to kind of deal with that. Your manager is probably in a meeting. They're probably in their office. You're the boots on the ground right there. I've seen some charge nurses handle that stuff really well, where they say, "Hey, can I talk to you too? Let's go sit down. What's going on?" And sitting down and having an honest conversation. We don't need to get like passive aggressive and have people being mean to each other. Let's just sit down and have a conversation. I saw that modeled one time when I was actually still an intern. Two nurses I don't even know what the issue was, but they were being really mean to each other and being passive aggressive and rolling their eyes and saying, things that were really not cool. The charge nurse said, "Hey guys, come here." And they went into the break room, sat down and said, "Can we, let's just talk, what's going on?" And one said their thing. She kind of mediated a little bit. They talked about it. They didn't become buddies, but they was like, okay, we're going to treat each other with respect. We'll get through our shift. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if you've got those, you might have to deal with those kinds of situations, which are tough and not fun, but we're professional adults that should be able to kind of work through that kind of stuff and not have to call on management anytime we have disagreements between each other. And truly kind of that charge nurse might be the one that needs to facilitate that sometimes. So that might be something you got to do. Just throwing that in there.
Yep.
Yep.
You're right.
All right.
I
Is that it?
think too, let me just emphasize that if you are a charge nurse and you have a patient assignment, it's super important to know that your patients come first. Because I don't know how the communication process is, but if you have some nurse, we are carrying cell phones, hospital cell phones now. That's how we communicate. If you're doing patient care, don't stay on your task. Don't stop to answer that telephone. If you've got a phone call and you're in the middle of doing something with your patient, that phone call can hold. I think sometimes when especially as a new charge nurse and we have patients, it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, I got to pay attention to my charge nurse role first. No, you stay on your patients at that time. If it's a code blue or whatever going on in the unit, of course you're gonna help, but I don't want as a charge nurse for people to think that's my number one focus. You still have to be able, and it's hard. Being a charge nurse is hard.
It's hard.
So anyway, it's fun, it's good, and the more you learn, the more empowered you feel, and you're like, okay, so the next time the next time there's a drug deal in a room, I know what to do.
And that did make me think too, like, in addition to doing your own stuff, you're watching over the unit, you're having a big picture thing. Typically, if you have less patients, theoretically, you should have some time to check on people.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
So a good
that help.
Yeah, a good charge nurse is going to regularly ask their nurses if they need help, and not be mad when the nurse takes them up on that. And then, so some of the best charge nurses I know would know, okay, I have maybe all my patients, let's say I'm sure, maybe all my nurses have 4 patients except one has 5. I'm going to go to that one chick that has 5 patients. I'm going to pass their meds on one of them. Being aware of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then around lunchtime, hey, have you gone on a break yet? What can I do to help you get to a break? Like that kind of stuff. Making sure everybody's getting breaks. I just cringe when I have charge nurses who kick back and think, okay, I've only got 2 patients and all I got to deal with are admissions and discharges. And that's
Right.
it. Like, not cool.
The most efficient, the best charge nurses that I like are not just ones that just go and ask the words. They're the ones that do the tasks.
And they anticipate.
Right.
They're proactive.
Right. So it's not just me saying, Katie, what can I do for you? It's, I see that you have a new admission. Can I go ahead and work on your admission navigator for
Boom.
you?
Yes.
Or let me go get the fluids the doctor just ordered for you. Let me look at your orders that just came in.
Yes.
Or I see you're getting an admission. I'm going to go give your meds and your other patient. Is that okay? Is really not just saying the words, what can I do? But it's actually even offering a specific task. Because sometimes you're just like, I've got so much to do. I don't even know what to ask for help with.
I can't even tell you how many times I've gone to both of you like, I don't even know what to do next. And you're like, okay, I have very vivid memories of both of you walking me through, okay, talk to me. What do you have to do? And then, so being able to verbalize, especially when you've got someone who's got a lot of patience, and it's like, how do I know? I don't even know what to do next. I'm so overwhelmed. And having someone come in and say, so your patient's call light is going off, but I'm going to get them. Can I give them their meds while I'm in there? Yes, you can. That would be so great.
Right. Right. But it's looking at the work list in the EMR. What kind of things can I do for you? I see you haven't validated your vitals all day. Can I do that for you? It's actually being that proactive and really kind of taking those steps, not just waiting to be asked.
Yes.
But to be active and engaged and being proactive and planning for that.
Yeah. So I feel like the moral of all of these,
Yeah.
all of the stuff we've talked about is being proactive and being engaged, as opposed to being like kicking back and disengaged. Like that makes such a big difference, and it makes your
I have
shift.
such a vivid image.
I do
When
too.
she says kicking
think
back
we
to
all
the
do.
nurse's station.
And I think like that makes your shift go by so much better.
Yeah,
It does.
When you're working together
It
as a
creates
team.
trust.
It creates, you know what, we're all not going to have the easy shift, but we're all going to not have the terrible one, because we know somebody's got my back.
Yeah.
When I'm drowning, somebody's got and again, and going back to that basketball comparison, when you know you got somebody who's not going to hustle, who's not going to do the things that they're supposed to do, and everyone else has to carry them. We all get resentful. We all get mad. We do not like working with that person. And it pulls the team down. So if you can like step up to the plate, the game, everything will run so much smoother if everybody is being proactive and engaged. And you as the charge nurse are the leader and need to be the role model and the example. If you cannot expect the people with you to be engaged if you're not.
Right.
It's like the easiest way to teach somebody how to do something is to be that yourself, right? You want your kids to spend less time on their phone, you better get off your phone. You know what I mean? You want them to tell people thank you. You better tell people thank you in front of them. That's how they learn, not by saying you should do this. Like it's by example is how we all learn, even as adults. Like to be honest, like the first time I realized that it was okay to hug a patient, you know, was when, or a patient loved one was when you modeled that, Elizabeth. We had a patient who was dying. It was terrible. It was terrible. And the wife was sobbing. And you were like, can I give you a hug? And she was like, yes. Like, and you gave her a wonderful hug. And she cried on your shoulder. And I was like so touched by that. But I would never have done that had I not seen that. And I have done that a few times since, or many times with permission. And those patients or their loved ones are so thankful for that connection and that just a moment of humanity. Never would have done that if it wasn't modeled for me. And how much of a profound impact we can have on our team by modeling stuff. Because if I'm running around asking people if they're okay, if they need help, you know what they're probably going to do when they're doing okay? They're probably going to go around and ask other people if they need help. And if we're all doing that, we're going to get through this a lot better, and we're going to have a lot more joy doing it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Woohoo! Joy.
Yeah.
Yay.
All right, guys. Chargy nurse stuff done, right? Any more?
And just know your leadership, know the chain of command.
Yes, yeah. So who do I call for this next one? And
don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah, and it's different on night shift. Like, you know, who you'd call first at 3 p.m. is very different than who you call first at 3 a.m. when you need to go up the chain of command. But sometimes you got to do it on night shift.
Yeah.
And do I call my manager? Is this a director thing? Is this how do we
nursing,
do this?
You know, a lot of times nighttime it's nursing supervisor. You know, if you're getting bombarded with patients and you're down 2 nurses and call them and just be like, look, what can you help me out with the plan, because we're drowning.
We're drowning and I need solutions. All right, guys. Well, that rounds out our tips for new charge nurses. All of our show notes are going to be at freshrn.com/44. If you want tips on assertiveness, if you want tips on building confidence, I have that built into my new nurse masterclass and my breakthrough ICU course about how to communicate in an assertively kind and curious way, as well as being able to like navigate some challenging situations with confidence. So, all right. Thanks, guys. If you have a moment, we would love it if you took a second to rate and subscribe. Maybe drop a little comment. I don't know how much time you have, but that would be super cool. All right. Thanks, nurses. Stay fresh.
Damn girl, better hit the floor. All the other fellas better run for the door. Stop, drop, and roll with me. I got the heat that'll make you scream.